What's going on, everybody? It's Marcus from TCG Discussions. Welcome back to another video called Striving Not to Strive, where we talk about the Yonas scandal involving him possibly cheating or not cheating, which we're not really going to talk about that, right? This is actually going to be more about Bandai, and the reason I chose this title, even though Yonas and the scandal does have to do with it, is I chose this because it's actually Bandai striving not to strive for a competitive integrity based on their TRM, and we're going to get into that. So what happened? And the first slide is titled One Piece Card Game is a Competitive Joke. So it was brought to my attention that Yonas Abraham was caught with a fifth copy of My Era Begins in his deck. After doing so, he only received a game loss. Here's the issue. Many people believe that this behavior is cheating, is worthy of a DQ at minimum, is completely beneath Yonas as a player and as a Nats champion. And what I mean by this statement is that it's both character-wise beneath Yonas to do something like this, and as a Nats champion, they believe he should know better, right? So it's kind of like a dual whammy there, or a paradoxical whammy, I should say, and believes that this is given the green light for people to cheat in the game. Here are the advantages that I can outline of actually having a fifth copy of My Era Begins as a Blackbeard player. These were the immediate first thoughts. So better going first and more first turn options, great trigger that contributes to the trash. This aka also contributes to Burgess, increases consistency of his deck, lost a card that has a weakness going first. So the exchange for this, and we'll talk about it when we view the Twitter post, is he had a fifth copy of My Era Begins, but he had one less copy of Lafitte in his deck. So going first, Lafitte can be popped against certain black decks and possibly removed early in the game. And so that is one weakness of the card. The other one is that Lafitte takes two Dons. So if you're forced to go first and you have nothing but Lafitte's for searchers in your hand, you can't use Lafitte right away. You can play it down, and the mirror can get removed if they play Doc Q. It can get removed if they against Lucci if they play Rook, for example. So it's just overall a weaker card. It also requires more Dawn to use. Makes it less punishing when the decks take second from the deck by getting the same game plan online. So if your opponent actively chooses to make you go first, Lafitte is a card that cannot be used, whereas My Era can be, and you have more copies of that card to initiate a better going first turn, and it feels Kuzan, which is an extra draw inadvertently, right? So you're going to get a card that you want in the trash, more likely off of Era, and then you're going to be able to get a draw on. And who can blame the outrage? Nobody. It could be favoritism of Yonas that this is just a slap on the wrist because a lot of people want him to be DQ'd. After all, One Piece TCG grinder brought up a story where a Lucci player at Virginia Beach was disqualified from Taka due to a deck error of having more Spandine in his deck than he should have and less copies of another card. Additionally, Yonas at One Piece Day also only received a game loss for this same infraction. So it definitely looks like favoritism, right? The question is, was the judge justified? Did he get it right? And what does this mean for the game? The TRM. Great news. It's completely dog shit. And apparently written to just allow Nats champs and cheaters to get away with a slap on the wrist, and is barely an inconvenience. And what I mean by cheaters is I'm not calling Yonas a cheater here. He is a Nats champ, and he's getting a slap on the wrist for this infraction. But the cheaters are the people who are going to see this, what I'm talking about here shortly, and start foaming at the mouth. So I just want to clarify, I'm not calling Yonas directly a cheater, and I'll explain that too. And I know nobody wants to hear this. And it's just barely an inconvenience. We're just going to move on, pretend like the tournament wasn't ruined for other people in his run, and all this other stuff. So what do I mean by his run? So here's the proof. Yonas posted 7-2 for a bittersweet run in the Carta Magica Regional. Teach was busted, but I had a deck error that costed me round 9, and good luck to Sammy and Kevin in the finals. He beat Nami, Ploofy, Red Pete, Luffy, Bid Teach, he beat Lim, he beat Dofi, then he lost to Dofi, and then got basically game lost for round 9. Let me explain something right now. Fifth copy of My Era Begins would be really broken in round 4 and 5 particularly. It basically enables Burgess to get bigger really quickly, and he's going to see it more often even if he doesn't see all 5 copies. This match up specifically, it's a massive advantage. Also allows him to search Kuzan, while cards that go to the drop that can be fueled off Kuzan, like aka Burgess and other cards that are good in the matchup like Van Augur. But he played a fifth copy of this and one copy less of Lafitte, so he had 5 and 1 here. But somebody's commenting, what do you mean deck error? And he says my list was actually playing 5 My Era Begins and 1 Lafitte instead of 4 and 2. It was caught only after round 8. Somebody else comments, how did you not notice that? And going down further, I really wanted to read this one because I think that this also shows how well Yonas is responding to the harsh criticism of this. An error cost round 9, but you played an illegal deck for technically 8 rounds prior. Man up and say sorry. Not oopsie, I had an extra card. Crazy to make light of it. Arguably the most consistent deck and an extra copy of a card that makes it even better. No accountability. I appreciate you taking this infraction seriously, and I agree that any list with 5 copies of a card can give players an unfair advantage. While it was the head judge's decision to give me a game game loss rather than a DQ today. Any future mishaps will likely result in harsher punishments. And this right here, if I can highlight this, right? The question is, did the head judge decision get it right? Back to the previous slide here. Was the judge justified? Did he get it right? And if so, what does that mean for the game? And I'm going to tell you something that nobody wants to hear. The answer is yes, the head judge got it right. So let's go to the TRM, as you guys can clearly see that I have highlighted up here. Tournament materials: 1 leader, 50 cards made of characters, events, and stages. Cards can only match the color of your leader in your deck, and a deck can contain no more than 4 cards with the same card number, aka no more than 4 cards ever. A Dawn deck with a total of 10 Dawn cards, anyone playing 11 or more is just flat out needs to be DQ'd. No more than 4 copies of the same card can be included in a deck. So this is pure deck construction of your tournament materials. It's just going to be a violation of basic deck building to have a 5th copy of a card. All championship level events require deck lists. Players may not use decks with cards that differ from those included in their deck list. There's another expectation, right? And you should know what your decks are and your deck lists. Now, here are the errors. Deck error: incorrect number of cards in deck. Infraction which a player's deck list or deck contains the incorrect number of cards, either above or below the amount required in the main/Dawn deck. So under over 50, bottom line, right? And then some variation with deck list compared to deck. Under over 50. Deck error: incorrect cards in deck/deck list. An infraction in which a player's deck does not match the submitted deck list at the time of a deck check. So at the time Yonas was deck checked after round 8 and he lost to Dofi, he would have suffered this infraction, and the penalty is a game loss because he had a card in his deck that altered the deck list compared to the deck list that was submitted, or the deck compared to the deck list that was rated, to not get it confused. Illegal cards in a deck: an infraction which the deck produced by the player includes cards that are either invalid for deck construction or contrary to the rules of the game. And the penalty for this is a game loss. You can argue he violated both of these. And the bottom line is, the judge actually just had to stop there. That's it. Because when we get to this section, which is cheating, and this is something that my editor, in all his wisdom, has pointed out, knowingly contravenes the rules or tournament's policies and makes mistakes intentionally for attempted persona gain. They need to get their spelling on top of updating this, or knowingly cheats. Realizing you accidentally included cards that are in violation of the rules of the game, but you continue playing without informing a judge. So the judge would have to prove that Yonas realized that he was including cards that are in violation of the rules of the game. Additionally, intentionally performing an action which allows you to gain or potentially gain an advantage over an opponent. He has to prove that he intentionally knew that his deck list was an error. The bottom line is the cheating standard for this needs to be severely updated so that the subjectivity of the player is not even a variable that can allow something like this to even remotely happen. And to show you how bad this TRM gets, I want you to just read this. Invalid cards in secret areas. Fraction where there's an incorrect number of cards in the secret area, cards in an invalid state in a secret area. Pay attention to this penalty. It is only a warning. Issue a warning to the player/players responsible for the action that caused the invalid cards to be in the secret area, aka your hand. It is clear to the judge's satisfaction which cards are to be incorrectly located in the secret area. Those cards can be returned to the correct area. So it's up to the judge to correct the game state. This is just absolute nonsense. You're going to tell me that this is going to somehow be up to the judge to decide whether they saw the correct card and quote unquote make it right by sending that card from their hand when they just added it legally to their hand to the deck or wherever it came from. Absolute nonsense. For a card from the deck, it is returned to the top of the deck. This card is from life, then it is shuffled back into the life area. If it is not clear to the judge's satisfaction which cards are incorrectly located in the secret area, the judge is to randomly select a number of cards incorrectly held and return them to the appropriate secret area, sufficiently randomize them in that area again. Examples: a player drew 3 cards instead of 2. What? A player accidentally added a card from their deck to their hand directly when they should have revealed it first. And the penalty for this is just a simple warning. This is not acceptable for regional play. It's not acceptable for Nats play. It's certainly not acceptable for Worlds play. What are we talking about? So bottom line, boys and girls, the TRM, right news, it's completely dog shit. Apparently written to just allow Nats champs and cheaters to get away with a slap on the wrist and is barely an inconvenience to people. And we're just gonna hop into what I think are revisions that need to happen for this game. All players should be required to submit an accurate deck list following all expected procedures according to the rules of the TRM of deck construction and held to this standard severely. Sorry, boo-boo, your stupidity of not being able to count isn't acceptable in any professional setting where you can get into nats. This does not just mean 5 copies of card. It means 3 copies of one card and 2 of another, and their numbers are flipped. Okay, you can't count. Sorry on ya. You can't count to 4. You can't count to 3. You can't count to 2. You literally need to be held to a severe standard for this. This nonsense of people saying I made a mistake is not acceptable. Okay, it's just not. You can't have a competitive, integral environment where people can get away with doing dumb shit. Bottom line, all deck errors compared to submitted tournaments, deck lists should be considered a DQ. So under no circumstance should this not be the case every time for regional plus events. You need to understand this. If you have a deck error, which we'll get into a small solution that can help these harsh penalties and curb it a little bit more, just to give you the extra fluff that I know all the people that are going to be freaking out over this suggestion need. If you have a deck error in round 8 of a tournament, and it's not just an error, but it's a 5th card of something that's not even legal according to deck construction rules, this shouldn't be a game loss. This should be a DQ. This shouldn't be oh, I realized that I had a 4th Vasco shot and 1 less of some random useless card that I didn't have in my deck so that my Dofi matchups could get better with more blockers. And I'll give you another great example. Okay, deck errors. Let's say that a Shanks player is checked after playing against a Blackbeard player and they have an extra Goldie Roger other than the one that they had registered on their deck list. Do you think that that card just assumedly was an error from the beginning of the tournament of that player? No. Let me just remove all of the assumption for you and just DQ the player for it. If you somehow have a card that looks like it's advantageous, the judge shouldn't even be able to subjectively have the opinion to interpret it. It should be removed for them. At regional plus events, you should just be DQ'd for having a card in your deck that does not match your deck list. Because if at any point your deck list looks like it's altered because guess what? Here's the other thing. Everyone walks around with their backpacks at events. Everybody does. If you know what the player is going to play before you sit down, which I know someone's going to bring this up, right? That you can't talk about players' decks and whatever unless it's like in between your rounds and all this other stuff. But people know what they play. Some people are out to get any competitive edge that they possibly can, and they will put cards in their deck. I mean, every single game has had this problem. They will cheat. They will put cards in their lap. They'll do whatever they can. They'll do whatever they can to win the game. So let's just set a standard. If it doesn't match your deck list, you're DQ'd. And we'll give you a fluff cushion later. We'll talk about it, all this other stuff. But we'll make sure that everybody is to the best of the tournament organizer's ability right before round 1 starts. And after round 1 starts, you're cooked. All decks found to be in violating deck construction should immediately be considered cheating, DQ'd, and the judge submit a report and recommend an investigation. If you can't count to 4, you have a 5th copy of a card. And I point this out because of all the advantages I can easily name of having a 5th copy of this specific card. This should be considered cheating immediately, and a judge submitted a report after DQing the player. They should not be able to collect prizing after winning 7 rounds in a row with an illegal deck, period. Anyone who thinks that's fair to the other 7 players has no integral backbone to competitive integrity. Repeat deck errors should outright receive increased penalties. Second offenses should require an investigation and have a minimum suspension. That is to say that if you're a repeat offender of continuously having deck errors that looks like it could benefit you in any way, you need to be suspended, so long as there is no outside error. So that is to say that the TCG app doesn't just catastrophically fail, the computer TO system doesn't just crash, or a player notifies the judge of a decklist submission error before the first round starts. And we'll talk about that. Dawn obfuscation in any way, stacking and hiding it under a card is at minimum a game loss and is to be considered cheating and possible disqualification. Isaiah is to be considered cheating, so that is to say that it should be investigated. The players that think that they're slick ricks and stack their Dawn on top of each other and say, oh, I just do that, right? You're an idiot and you need to stop. You can't stack your Dawn to obfuscate it from your opponent. There is no reason to ever stack your Dawn. It doesn't help you count the Dawn that you have left, and it also doesn't benefit your opponent in any way from being able to see what's left in order to properly make decisions on your attacks. This stupid tactic needs to be curbed immediately. If a judge walks by and sees one of the players' dawns stacked in a stack on top of each other, they need to receive a warning, or if it is like blatant, it's completely blatant that their intention is to cheat by stacking the dawn, it needs to be considered a game loss and is to be considered cheating and investigated. This literally happened in Latin America for the entire world to see. Dude got away with like playing a Hody Jones when he didn't have enough dawn to, and stacking and hiding under card. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's at minimum a game loss. Like, if you're hiding your dawn, stacking it on top of each other, like if the judge walks by, sees that there's a dawn that is like flush with a card that attacked, okay, and then all of your dawn is stacked on top of each other, you just need a game loss. All life obfuscation should be a game loss with future repeat offenses requiring a DQ into another investigation. The judge walks by and again, your life is stacked so that your opponent cannot see it. And I don't mean like thinly, there's some separation, but I mean like again, right? The judge can walk up and be like, hey, bro, let's not do that. But, you know, like spread it out. But, you know, players could hold themselves accountable to this. But like if it is just stacked in a stack of 5 on top of each other and a judge walks by and see it, should be a game loss. Cheating is defined as a player violating deck construction in any way, intentionally or not, and is a DQ plus investigation. No player should win 7 rounds with an illegal deck in addition to what is already there. When I say this, there's probably more that you can expand to this because I say things could be considered cheating, but the reality is the intention of the player should never be considered in the facts of what happened. No player should win 7 rounds with an illegal deck. I mean, it wasn't even a violation of deck list. It was an illegal deck by construction. There should be absolutely no debate that that should be considered cheating and is immediately a disqualification and an investigation. The judges need to investigate it, and it needs to be reported to Bandai in addition to what is already there. So again, this is going to help curb all the harshness of that. All players are given a 5-minute pre-round 1 start opportunity to check their deck and compare deck submission to make sure that there are no errors. And I could see if like 50 people in the room get some kind of submission error wrong, they can be given another 5-minute extension or 6-minute extension where they can fill out a paper deck list, and then they are to immediately see a judge with the correct deck list and then immediately get that taken care of after round 1, and then they can proceed into round 2 going forward. And then that player can get flagged and say that there was a deck error, submission error, right? Anyone not being honest and following that procedure then gets caught later in the tournament on a deck check of having a deck error, whether ratios or there's 5 copies of a card, they are completely DQ'd. You had all the opportunity at this point before round 1 started. So there is absolutely no way you can argue that the player didn't know or didn't have a chance or was lazy or any of this other stuff. Players found to be drawing extra cards at any time do not get to randomly have cards taken from them or randomly shuffle the top of their deck to randomize the deck again. They receive a warning that is recorded for the tournament. If any following white flipping, extra drawing, and or over searching will then be considered a game loss, and another infraction of this is a DQ and a launch investigation. Here's the issue, okay? Drawing extra cards and looking at extra cards, that can happen. If I go to top 3 search off of Hachinosu and I accidentally grab a 4th card with my pinky and it flips a card over, that can be a warning, okay? You just call the judge over and let them know what it is. Sometimes it's an easy fix. I also think that you can just set the card face up. It can be a warning. It is what it is. It doesn't even have to be a warning of that. Like, that can be a legitimate accent. I'm talking about the guy, though, that's like, hey, check this out, dude. I had an effect that drew 2. I drew 3. Now, I stop it, call the judge over, say it was 3. My opponent can verify it's a 3. Fine. All right, these are the 3 cards I drew. I set them down. I separate it from my hand. It's whatever. That scenario could be a warning. You can move on with that. The other one where it gets added to the hand, and the moment it touches the hand, it should be considered all private knowledge. And any, right, randomization or whatever, whether there's a judge hovering over them or not to repair the game state, none of that should matter. It should just be removed from the judge's hands. That run right there should be a game loss, because randomly shuffling cards into the deck wouldn't change if my opponent got a severe advantage from drawing an extra card that they shouldn't have had in their hand. And if the 2 cards a judge accidentally shuffles back are completely garbage and didn't change anything, but the extra card of the third was like massively pivotal and wins in the game, then that player gets screwed. And it's not the other player's fault that the guy didn't draw correctly, drew an extra card and added it to a sacred area, and then they should be tracked. If it's a warning, it should be tracked. If it repeats again, it's a game loss. This is accounting for accidents, real accidents, but if it's just blatant cheating, then they can just get DQ. Altered sleeve should be investigated for cheating, and if found, should be a DQ and investigated for a suspension. I know a player in the Dragon Ball the community that's just done this way too many times. I don't understand how he's ever allowed to compete at any Bandai event ever, even though he's been suspended multiple times. All players who receive a game loss for any regional tournament for any reason should be recorded in his system so that repeat offenses result in DQ/investigations for suspension. So if you receive a game loss at any regional for any reason, you should get that game loss recorded. It should appear on your Bandai profile. If you receive a similar infraction game loss and another regional afterwards, they can have like fall off times. We can 5-6 months. It can be whatever. You should then immediately get DQ and investigated for suspension. If you're just continuously getting game losses across multiple regionals for this, I don't think we should be lenient on you doing things that get you game losses. You should just get better. Okay, so is this too harsh? So I'm just going to say from other games perspectives, from Magic to Yu-Gi-Oh, from Dragon Ball Masters to even Fusion World, the standards are just better. No, it's not harsh because if we want high level events, we should just have standards. Bottom line, you just have standards. Locals are locals and you can repair game states there. That's the time to make those mistakes, and errors for local level is one thing, but regionals get invites to Nats. Nats has a chance to represent Worlds, and Worlds level players should not make these kinds of mistakes. It's like chess, touch move, touch take. The decisions you make at regionals, they need to be held to a different standard than your locals. If a Nats invite is on the line, it needs to be held to a different standard, a more professional standard. Touch move, touch take, for those of you who do not know, is in chess. If you touch a piece without saying adjust, you have to move that piece. If while moving that piece, you touch an opponent's piece and that piece has the ability to take the piece, you must take it. This means the choices that you make, you have to stick to. The deck list that you make, you have to stick to. The way that you stack your Dawn and draw your cards and all these other things and resolve your effects, you have to stick to. And I'm not even asking for people to play any way than they normally do. Most players meet the rules that I'm talking about here without question. Most players don't make these errors. They don't. If at 1,000 player regional, only 2 people failed deck checks, that's nothing. It's just absolutely nothing. Most people don't stack 10 Dawn cards on top of each other, pick it up and shuffle it in their hands and do whatever. Most people don't stack their life in a way that obfuscates, or their Dawn in a way that obfuscates it for the opposing player. In fact, most people are very open. There's a lot of communication at these events about Dawn. Most players don't suffer from drawing 1 or 2 or 3 extra cards and requiring a judge to shuffle them back in there. But the bottom line is this. Yonas didn't receive a game loss because it was the wrong thing. He received a game loss because the TRM is dog shit and completely and utterly enables such a absolutely magnum opus of deck construction failure that I have literally never even heard of in any competitive game ever, of which the expectation of almost every single other game I've ever played across the board here would just result in a DQ and possible ban. I don't even understand how a game loss and continuance is acceptable to anybody holding a competitive integral event. It is the TRM's fault that we even have this situation before us. This situation wouldn't even be nearly worth talking about if that game loss was not the consequence. And it wasn't even a possibility. And even more, that it is the correct choice that the HUD judge had to make. That is what is so frustrating about this, because the onus of cheating is so subjective to the player's intent in the investigation of the judge that it promotes and fosters an environment where now simply cheaters will will walk into regionals with 5 copies of a card in their deck and simply expect to continue their tournament life after correcting their deck list if the judge can't prove intention, and they're certainly not going to admit otherwise. This cannot be the competitive One Piece that anybody wants, and the standards just need to be better. Thank you for watching. You do best. This is Marcus from TCG Discussions signing off. Laters.
起きろ。起きろ。起きろ。